In this interview, I meet up with Margie Binder, a former Navy helicopter pilot, a teacher, corporate cube dweller, government worker, entrepreneur, and most important role, mom to 3 young adults, 20, 19, and 17. Let's welcome Margie. Thank you so much, Margie, for coming in today for this interview.
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you, you took your 3 kids out of their school during their middle school year and wanted to go on a road trip with them and homeschool them. Why did you decide to do that?
Oh, so many reasons. My kids at the time, they were in 8th, 7th, and 5th grade. So I had 3 in 3 years, 3 very quickly.
Yeah.
And I was a middle school or junior high school teacher in the late 90s before they were born, which planted the seed a little bit about, wouldn't it be cool? I mean, I've always loved to travel, and I've had friends that have homeschooled for their kids' entire lives, and I didn't think that appealed to me, but I thought, wouldn't it be cool at that age, that tween age, to take the kids out of school for 1 year and just primarily do as much traveling as we could do. I like to say that, and this is coming from a junior high school teacher, that there are very few kids on the planet who couldn't miss a year of middle school and have that be impactful, especially I think if they're traveling, if you're spending time with family. So I did that. I did it certainly for those aspects. Also my kids, particularly for 2 of them. So I have a son, Scott, he's the oldest. So he was 8th grade at the time. And he is, I would say, socially a little awkward. He's kind of he would call himself a nerd or a geek, and he was picked on quite a bit in middle school and didn't have a strong friend group, and it was just not. I mean, middle school's tough for any kid, but he was just struggling with it socially and emotionally. Mm-hmm. Academically, he was doing fine. Then Olivia was a grade behind him in 7th, and I like to say she came out. She was born 30. I mean, she's very even keel, mature. She was doing fine. So it didn't. I don't think it had a huge impact. Not a huge reason to pull her out. But then and then Amy is in many ways, she's my youngest. Was 5th grade. She was quite an overachiever. I guess would categorize her as an overachiever, and very much a perfectionist. Very, very attuned to grades and numbers. And by the time she got to 5th grade, she was in some advanced classes, and I was a little concerned that she was getting so uptight with grades and scores and such, that my mindset has always been, learning is around every corner and anywhere you go, and there's so much more to learning than just grades and worksheets and tests and everything else. So she was her emotional state at that time, and was another big reason. I also, I grew up on the East Coast, and I was in the Navy for quite a while, and I really wanted my kids to spend more time with family and friends on my side of the family, and get to know my story a little bit more, and also spend time. Just the life skills involved. When you travel, you have to be flexible, and you have to learn. And one of the things we emphasized a lot was talking to adults, talking to other people. So I would say those are some of the big picture reasons. I mean, I could rattle off a dozen or more, but it was just, I thought it was a great time for them to bond as a trio. I like to say that they're points of a triangle in terms of interests and abilities, or interests and interests and some abilities. I mean, they're fairly bright kids, but their interests were wildly different. Personalities very, very different. So I wanted them to have that time together.
Yeah, perfect. Do you think you just pulled this off because you're a teacher, or a non-teacher can do it too?
I absolutely think that a non-teacher could do it, particularly for a 1 year model, and at that time frame. So the time frame was very specific. I did not want to mess with high school. I didn't want to have to worry about making sure that they had all the credits that they needed and the grades and all that and that type of thing. Because really, once you start into 9th grade and into 10th grade, you have to worry about, are you getting some of the right classes and so forth. I did not want to worry about that. So I knew that even though I wanted them to continue and learn academically, the only subject I was really worried about was math, because there's such a scope and sequence to math. Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that when they went back to school after a year, that they would not have to go back and learn something, or they would be able to continue on the track that they were on. So it took work, and it takes work to communicate with the school system, to research the requirements for the district, and it takes a little perseverance. I had more trouble with the girls going into middle school, so 6th and 8th grade when they went back, than I did with my son going into high school. They were terrific. They helped me figure out where he placed. They really left it up to me. He was kind of between math classes. They left it up to me, and I talked through it with his dean, which is kind of like a guidance counselor. So it takes work. So the answer is, do you have to have an education degree? Absolutely not, because I wasn't worried about sitting them in front of a chalkboard, a whiteboard, and going through grammar rules and all that. It was a 1 year, and it was mostly to travel and to learn life skills, social skills. We just did a variety of things.
So did you actually have a structure where on your travel, did you have them like 3 hours or 4 hours doing schoolwork, or did you just taught them on the go?
So I kind of planned out the year ahead of time, and I knew so we did this school year in 2013, 2014. In 2012, 2012 was the first year since the kids had been born. I was home with them for 3 years, and then my then husband and I swapped places. 2012 was the first year that since the kids had been alive that we had 2 incomes. And so that got me thinking, because I wanted to save a good chunk of money for the trips. It got me thinking of, boy, I wonder if we could do it. So I started planning out what trips I might want to take. And in the course of that, I was thinking, okay, probably 2 to 3 weeks is a good amount of time, which was very true. I mean, by about 3 weeks, everyone is kind of done with being on the road. And so we have some geographic advantages because we live in Minnesota. So we could kind of go all directions and plan and pretty much get to the coast and do loops in the 2.5 to 3 weeks. But then I outlined, like, one of our first long trip was to the Northwest. And so I started to look at, okay, what social studies unit? Well, the one that immediately came to mind was Lewis and Clark. And the summer before the school year, and which is really when I started our school year clock, we also did more of a family fun trip down to Florida, but we stopped in St. Louis and went to the Gateway Arch, which has the Jefferson Museum. And so we studied some of Lewis and Clark there. And then we studied and watched some video. We did some writing and even some worksheets that I found online about Lewis and Clark before we went on the trip. So that covered a social studies and some of the English, but each trip I would look at other things as well. Spending time in national parks. So certainly that Northwest trip, we hit 3 or 4 different national parks. Always tried to hit, if we were in a city, hit a science museum.
Yep.
And then in arts, we planned some arts, and the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. So we went to Midsummer Night's Dream Shakespeare Festival, but we also made sure there was fun, and I would involve the kids ahead of time with planning.
Nice.
But it was controlled. It wasn't like willy-nilly, okay, here, go plan this trip. It was, okay, we're going to be going to Portland, and we're going to be going to Seattle, and San Francisco was the other city we stopped in. So I gave each child the responsibility to, find a restaurant in Seattle. And then they would help me find a hotel, because for the most part, because, we're talking about budgeting, and for the most part, you don't want to stay right downtown in a city. So let's look at public transportation. So I really try to involve the kids. Oh, and they always love this. They each had to do, they would have to do a presentation to the rest of us on that
Sell
city.
it, to sell it, sell
So,
it to you.
you know, it's a mom's prerogative to torture your kids. So, anyway, so a good bit of planning went through. I mean, I had to look at everything ahead of time to have an idea of what I thought I wanted to do, but then give them some control as well. So, I mean, my daughter picked Voodoo Donuts to eat in Portland. And we also left room. And one of the beauties of not having a strict academic schedule was that I absolutely made time for fun, or made time for spontaneity. Like, for those who've been to Portland, we love bookstores. Pal City of Books is this massive bookstore, 5 levels, it's huge. We ended up going there for 2 different days. And so making time to do things like that. And so on a trip like that, the only academics was the math, really, that making sure that just about each day, or here are the assignments that you need to get done during the trip. And then it was very independent when they could do them. We did so much just discussing. I mean, that trip too, we did a factory tour for the Jelly Belly factory tour, which brings up questions about different types of employment and working and machinery. And I had a chance to talk to them about engineering, because we stood above the floor and watched jelly beans running through all these machines. And so that's the sort of thing that there was no check in the block or anything. And
yes.
so
And also math, you could teach it anywhere, right? I mean,
yes.
I mean, it's everywhere. Like, you even talking about the budgeting. I mean, that's math, planning. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we did a lot of what I bucket under life skills, and that finance and budgeting and things of that sort. But again, in the back of my mind, this is a 1-year deal. I did not want them to have to go to a lower level of math class just because they did this 1 year. So I knew that would be important to them. So I made sure that we did enough math during the year in the same scope and sequence that they would have been in, so that was not an issue. But otherwise, I mean, the social studies, the science, really, there's just not, in that age range, there just isn't anything that's a big deal.
Well, you went to museums and art centers. I mean, that's festivals. That's all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how did, when you pulled them out of the school and, go on this trip, were they like opposing, or were they excited? And did any concerns come up about, oh, I'm going to miss my friends?
Well, I think one of the good things that I did was, in 2012, when I started to think this might be possible, I didn't talk to them right away then. But then of course, my then husband and I talked about it quite a bit. It was about 6 months, so maybe January, February of 2013 is when I broached the idea with him. I started talking to them about it. I said, hey, I think, and again, it wasn't a matter of I was giving them a choice, but it was more just getting them used to the idea and explaining what we might be doing. And I think for the most part, I think that eased most apprehension. They knew it was just 1 year. I mean, Scott was pretty happy, because he was not happy in middle school. Amy was the toughest nut to crack, because she was so, I mean, I remember in the fall of 2013, I remember having a discussion with her. She wanted a report card. She wanted a report card just like 5th grade would have. And I had to, gently say no. But I think that we've always traveled as much as we can, which is 1, maybe 2 trips a year. They've always been travelers. They're all huge travelers now. Nice. But so they were excited about that aspect, because we've always had a lot of fun, even on road trips when, we had a Honda Pilot, an SUV, where I tell you that the car after 3 weeks on the road can get a little ripe. But that was something I just didn't worry about. And we cleaned it all out at the end. But I mean, but they were excited. It was fun. We had a ton of fun. So I think for the most part, they were pretty excited about it. Or looking forward to it, I guess. As to friends, I tried to, again, we talked, Scott didn't really have a friend group. And I mean, my experience as a teacher and my recollection just as a kid, and it seems like middle school is such a time of transition for friend groups. And so I think with Olivia, she's always had a good circle of friends, but at that point it was sort of shifting. And one of the things I tried to do was keep them in touch, especially the girls, keep them in touch with their schools and their classes. So Olivia, when we were in town, she went to the middle school band. She continued with band, and her teacher was great about it. About, when she's in town, great, have her come. If she's not, oh well, it's fine. Nice. And with Amy, her fifth grade teacher, who had been my son's fifth grade teacher, so I knew her. We went in her classroom twice that year and did presentations about one of our trips.
Nice.
Amy was in Girl Scouts, so we kept up with Girl Scouts. So we tried to keep up with things like that.
Yeah.
And then again, when they transitioned, so Scott and Amy both went to new schools when we got back, and that's always a transition with friends. And so it was hard to know how much impact the school year had, the homeschool year had, and how much it was just the age going into a new school. I mean, Scott, just, I think for him, going into a pretty large, like 1,600 kids high school, really was good for him, because he could get more lost in the crowd, and there were more kind of geeks. And by the time he finished high school, he just had this phenomenal friend group, and nice. Because there are just more people that he could surround himself with that got him. So I think they all
were okay.
Yeah, I think they all did pretty well with it, and I tried to make some conscious decisions about keeping them connected in different ways.
And how many states did you guys travel that year?
Well, counting, I think 3 other trips. So the 2 years before the homeschool year, we went to the Southwest. We did one trip. We just went to Colorado and back. And another trip, we did the 4 corners. We did Colorado, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico. And then we took another trip after the homeschool year where we went down to Texas. So counting those trips, we have been to 48 states, all of us.
Wow.
So we're just missing Alaska and Hawaii, and they're absolutely on the list. Nice. I think the homeschool year, I want to say it was somewhere in the 30s. We made it. Wow. We made it to.
Nice.
And it's so cool, because I think the kids really, as they've gotten older, and it's not something they really talk about with their friends unless it comes up. And I know recently Olivia said something about, it came up with one of her friends. She said something about this year. Olivia said something about this year that they had, and they're like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
And so I think the kids are starting to realize how this was not the norm.
Yes. So, that is cool.
I think they think it's much cooler now than they did back then.
Yeah. And even going back, you said you went back to her classroom and presented one of your trips.
For Amy, yes, the youngest. Yeah,
that's cool. Yes. That's pretty cool. Like, she didn't get to go to school, but she get to tell about her vacation. So that was good. When they did go back, do you think they had a hard time fitting back into school? I know your son was kind of switching over, but what about the girls?
No, they really didn't, because Scott going into high school and then Amy going into middle school, I think there was some awkwardness in the friend transition anyway, but I don't think that had as much to do with the homeschool road school year as it had to do with middle school. Kids their interests are changing, and now instead of being in a single classroom and maybe going out for math and reading, now they're changing classes every hour. So I think Amy had some pretty normal struggles going into 6th grade, and Olivia she was fine. I mean, she's always had a strong friend group. I think it was sort of transitioning at that time. But I think the band was a good thing, because I think she started having some of her closest friends in high school were some of those kids that she was in band with. So going into, as she went back to middle school for 1 year and then into high school, and then she's always had a terrific friend group.
Yeah. It's always the personality of the child, right?
Oh, very much. Yeah.
What was the most valuable thing as a mom you learned during this trip, road schooling?
Oh, wow. From a learning perspective, um, I hope I think I modeled to them just everything we did. I would be enthused about. It was never like, oh, okay, science museum, go here, let's do it. I'm like, ooh, what do they have? What do they have here? Let's look at it. And we'd look online ahead of time. And so modeling that excitement, and I genuinely was. I mean, I love that stuff. I love, it doesn't matter, anything. So certainly just some of the things that we did in the history, and particularly when we went to Washington, D.C., and Williamsburg and New England, and learning more American history was good. In terms of like self-discovery, myself, I've had a good perspective as a mom, with not try as best as I can, not taking my kids and my life for granted. I think part of that has to do with a dear friend of mine who was a little bit older than me, and she passed away a couple years ago. But about the time that I met her in the late 80s, her husband and 6-year-old son were killed in a car accident. And it's kind of a funny thing to bring into this talk, so forgive me if it's going a little off kilter, but I think it made such a difference to me in terms of, I am never going to whine or complain about being a mom and having my kids. And I want my kids to never doubt for a second how much I love them.
Mm-hmm.
Even when, as a mom, I'm busy and I'm working outside, and most of the time I've been working outside the home. I never want them to doubt that they're my number one priority.
Yep.
So from a self-discovery, I guess it validated some of that, yep, because it was such a valuable time for all of us. I think also perhaps as a mom, I think a very common, we have our doubts and am I doing the right thing? Yeah. Am I, the insecurities about, am I screwing up my kid? Have I done my best? And even when those start to creep up, I kind of can go back and go, okay, I might have screwed up everything else, but that year was the best mom thing I've ever done. Yes. And it did take some courage to put it together, to step out, to walk away from a job, and to say, so I think I can kind of hang my hat on that, I guess, a little bit, to say, sure, of all the other things that I've done, yes, maybe I've screwed things up from time to time, that was a really good thing.
Yeah, and they saw that how you planned it too, right? You were teaching your kids how you can plan something and you can achieve it.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, very excellent point. Yes. Yeah. And again, I think because I think they'll say that so much of the year was a blur, but they remember, now that they're a little bit older, they are remembering more and more, and I never had illusions that they were going to remember a lot of very specific things, but I just wanted to lay the foundation. I wanted to lay this foundation of learning is so much more than learning in a book and a test score, and learning is so much more than, I'm a huge believer in public schools. That's why they went, that's why they went back. It was just a one-year thing, but that you don't have to have that structure all the time to learn and to enjoy learning. And so, and I guess another big area was, I wanted them to learn how important it is to have community and connection. Mm-hmm. So one of the things we did was interviews with people, either friends of mine that I stayed with, or relatives, or I knew that because I graduated from the Naval Academy, and one of the women I played basketball with there graduated a year ahead of me. At the time, in 2013, she was the commanding general at Parris Island, the Marine Corps depot. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to go there and talk to her and visit with her. And it was actually, my parents were with us at the time, and my dad had gone through Parris Island as a Marine recruit 50 years prior. So to have that kind of connection, and for them to see my dad, to go there, and my friend General Reynolds set us up with one of her master sergeants, who gave us a very personal tour. And so to see that and to make those connections, and the kids interviewed General Reynolds, and one of the questions I had the kids ask was about what does success mean? What does it mean to have a successful life? So again, it's the general, it's not the checks in the box, it's that community, it's the connection, laying that as a foundation. They might not remember. I mean, Amy remembers using the general's using the general's bathroom. She doesn't remember much else, but she remembers that. But again, it was laying that foundation.
It's there. They have it, right? It's kids remember stuff.
It pops up from time to time, and I just go.
What would your kids say about this experience if I was to interview them today? Like, what would they say?
Well, for sure, it's, it was all kind of a blur.
Yeah.
Or some of it was a blur. That I think they'd say they appreciate it a lot more now than they did back then. I think because so many, when we would visit friends or talk to people and they'd hear about what we were doing, to a person, the adults would say, "Oh, that is so cool. You're so lucky." And I think after the second or third trip, they were just done. I mean, they're like, eye rolls. Okay, fine. Yeah, whatever. But I think they appreciate, and I think I was very careful not to, beat them over the head with a hammer and say, "You're so lucky. You need to appreciate this." No. It was what it was. And I wanted them to just get a lot out of it. So I think that they appreciate it a lot more now than they did then. And they think it's very cool, all the different things that we did. We didn't just go to the museums, and we didn't just go to national parks, and
it's a variety.
There's this balance, which I don't think they realized at the time, but there was this balance of what we did each trip. And even taking public transportation there was a reason. I wanted to make sure we took public transportation in different places. And so I think they're putting that connection together. I think they would say that the car rides got long sometimes, but
something that our kids always do is that, they make us go back and live with them these moments, right? Like, you probably wanted to travel when you were young, maybe, you thought about it, right? Somewhere along the way, you could have probably thought, "Oh, I really want to visit all these places." But, having kids, we always kind of do it for them, but we do it along with them too, right?
Yes, that's certainly, that is certainly the benefit. And I had already been to, I want to say about 35 states. And when I was in the Navy, I was stationed over in Sicily for 3 years. And so I had been to, I think, 12 to 15 different countries over in Europe and the Middle East. So I certainly saw the value of traveling, but I certainly didn't shy away from the opportunity to see more with my kids, because it is such, I think it's just such a great thing to do for so many reasons.
Yeah. You said earlier that your son was kind of struggling, right? And then you took this year off. When he went back, did you notice a change? Like, did that break give him a little bit more confident to, did you notice?
I did, but I can't sit here and claim that it was all the homeschool year and the road school year. Yeah. I think it's certainly
age.
Even at the beginning, it was, I could feel a sense of relief from him, because going to middle school was just not fun for him. It was just always stressful, because socially he had nothing to look forward to, and academically it's school, it's middle school. And so, I mean, he was doing fine in school, but it just, he didn't have friends, and he was picked on. And so I think I could sense pretty quickly just relief and happiness, because we've gotten along pretty well. That year certainly bonded us further. So again, I don't want to claim that, that year was all the difference in the world. When he went into high school, I think the kids are very fortunate there. And I've lived in the East Coast. I've lived in Florida, and I got my teaching degree down in Florida. So I have awareness of school systems down in the South. Minnesota school systems, by and large, are really, really good. And they go to an excellent high school, public school, but excellent high school. And so he had a lot of opportunities academically to take different classes and do different things. And I think what I hope is that the emphasis on, finding your tribe, finding your community, pursue your interests, and surround yourself with people that kind of get you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that made a difference as he went in. It wasn't like instantly he had his friend group, but I think he was more confident and more secure with who he was. And gradually over the course of the first couple years, this friend group really found each other, and there were like 20, 25 kids. I think every morning in the library would get together, and
Wow.
he had a grad party with 5 guys. There were 5 guys. They had this, and it did my heart great. So I think it made a difference,
Yeah.
but there's certainly other factors.
Yeah, I believe it
Maturity
did.
and changing schools and so forth as well.
You said there was a sense of relief. That relief is a big deal, right? Because he was holding up to his expectation. I have to go to school. I have to go to school, right? But
Yes.
that relief made him rethink some of the stuff, reflect, right? Like any of us. So it's for sure valuable. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And you think about, I think as adults, how much a difference it makes when if we work outside the home, when we go to work, how much of a difference if it makes if we get along with our coworkers, get along with our bosses,
Yes.
versus if that's just a constant source of tension.
And
Even when we have to do cruddy jobs sometimes, if you're all in it together and you're in it with a group of people that you really like and get along with, it makes a huge difference getting through that.
yeah,
So for middle school, and Scott's certainly not the only one, when
it's a
you
hard
just don't
time.
have, you're awkward, you don't have a friend group, it's just stress, tension.
Yeah. And that age group, also tend to like easily laugh at each other for some reason. They don't know that yet. Like, I'm going to hurt. They're in that phase where, they don't have that quite completed in their brain that I
Oh,
might offend them or hurt them, right? It's gonna say it and then they're like, oh, I must have said something wrong, right? And then the other student feel bad and they're like, now I need to avoid that person because they've been mean. So it's kind of a tough time.
yeah, sometimes, and then sometimes it's their kids that I think don't realize it. Maybe they're having tough times themselves, and they're taking it out on other people that seem like easy targets.
Yeah.
And even if it's not, doesn't rise to the level maybe of bullying, it's still, they're translating that hurt to somebody else. And my son has always been the type, sensitive, and one of the most, I don't know what the word is for, he's just a good guy. I mean, he's just a nice guy. He doesn't pick on people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but he absorbed that. He
Yeah.
wasn't the kind of kid who was going to fight back. He just sort of absorbed it all.
Yeah.
And with that year and just spending time, I mean, his sisters, the 3 of them get along for the most part very, very well. They certainly have their moments, but just to be around then the 4 of us, of people that loved him and maybe teased him a little bit, but
Yeah.
was very
Yeah.
good for him.
Yeah, awesome. Now you do something different that where you help parents guide their kids through the college admissions process. Why did you get started on this? What made you start this?
Well, it's fairly new. I'm just starting out with this, but it's been in the works. Really, the seeds of this were planted in that homeschool road school year. One of the things that we did on the trips, and I started researching myself, was on each of the trips, we would either drive through or walk through. We didn't do any formal tours, but we would drive through or walk through 2 or 3 college campuses just to start the discussions, and which was really fascinating. That was a good thing to do, because it was, well, why is there a college of this and a college of that? And we just talked about all kinds of things, and also started talking about financial aid, financial stuff, and so forth. I saw the writing on the wall that I'm 8th, 7th, and 5th grade. I had graduated from the Naval Academy 20 plus years before that, so a very different admissions process and a very long time ago. So seeing the writing on the wall, I thought, okay, I need to start researching so I have a clue of what I'm going to do. And what I found in the resources, both online and print, as well as I started talking to parents, was there was a really big gap and disconnect in my mind of either, let's take resources. Resources seem to be either written for the teen, like you were going to hand a teen a book and the teen was going to read it, absorb it, and go, yeah, got it. I don't know about you, but no way. I mean, First of
So
all,
that's the
they're
debate.
all online anyway. So to use a book, and that's a stretch anyway. But then to expect them to understand and absorb and care enough about it at that point is just not realistic in my view. Or everything's written for the parents and to the parents, and like the parent is going to do everything and hover, and I really felt I was, and again, and talking to parents as well, of either talking in terms of, well, we're applying to this and this and this and this, or our application isn't due until this, and all the are we kind of stuff, and that just, I'm like, well, no. it's the kid's process. So the more the parent doing everything for the kid, or hovering over like a sitting on the shoulder looking at everything. Or there was the kid's deal, he'll figure it out, she'll figure it out, it's they're gonna have to figure it out how to pay for it, they'll figure it out. That. And then I talked that year to a parent whose kids were just out of college or in college with $80,000 of debt, $60,000 of debt, and I was trying not to let my jaw hit the ground, because I knew, and no judgment, because I knew this guy to be a terrific, what I could see of him, he was a terrific parent, but I just thought to myself, how as a parent could you let that happen, stand by? It makes such a difference. So putting all that together that year, that 2013 to 2015 or so time frame, I just saw a need, and it really fills my passion as well for back education and parenting, and not everything is a checkbox education type of thing. So I started, and again, this is a fairly new business, working on both work for group consulting as well as an online course, maybe putting in some virtual events, kind of what you're doing, but shorter, probably one day, just to help parents, to provide that community, to help parents help their kids. So I don't want to be the hero in the story. I don't even want them to be the hero in the story. I want them to help their kids and get through the process sanely.
Yes. And how can a homeschool parents make sure that their kids are ready and has all the credentials to enter post-secondary, right? That's a big deal, right? To have that checked. Do I have?
It is, and again, that was one reason that I did it in middle school, and I think that 7th, 8th grade, for the model that I use, the 1 year is an ideal age, because you don't have to worry about any of the high school credits.
Yeah.
So if a parent does want to do something like this, more work would be involved. You really need to make sure that you're checking state requirements and with your district, or however your schools are organized. Minnesota, it's districts, to make sure that they're getting the requirements. The good news is these days, I think online education is so much easier to obtain, and online education it has to be credentialed, and that's one of the things that I think parents need to be careful of for high school. You have to make sure you're not just going to Stanford for their MOOCs, their massive open online classes, and taking a class there and taking a class in biology and thinking that's going to give credit, high school credit, right? It's possible if you go through the credit process, but that's the sort of thing that's definitely a gotcha. Tons of stuff out there, but parents need to make sure that the district and the state will accept that as a requirement. But I know, again, I think the biggest piece of advice is check your state requirements.
Yes.
Because if you're doing a 1 year model, you have to be careful that you're getting the right classes. If you are doing a full-time 4-year high school, the requirements are probably going to be a little different. You don't have to worry about the requirements for your specific school. You just have to worry for state, which might be different.
Yeah. Did your interest start with the helping parents with college admissions from helping your kids? Did you see the gap also when your kids went on to college, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So at that, yes, because the seeds for the idea for this business were in that homeschool year 2013, 2015. Well, as I started to formulate what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, I realized, first of all, I have and had a day job.
Mm-hmm.
So I had other things I needed to do. I couldn't go full bore into a business, but I also thought, you know, I really need to make sure that this methodology works first. So using the things that I had learned and helping my kids through the process, it has been incredibly successful. So my son, coincidentally, both of my oldest two ended up at the same school.
Mm-hmm.
Very different processes. For my son, it was clear and away his first choice. He applied early decision. It was, and I felt too, I was glad that he felt this way. Well, let me back up a little bit, because we did, of course, did some tours, and one of the local state universities seemed like a good fit. I mean, it seemed like a good fit from my perspective, and he felt like it was a good fit. He wants to be a teacher. They have a very, very good teaching program, very well thought of in the state. But I know, knowing him and this, I think, was where the parenting can come in. Knowing him and how important community is to him, and being in smaller groups and having a relationship with good teachers and so forth. I said, hey, you know, why don't we check out some of the private colleges in the area? And this is something that I think a lot of parents don't realize, that even though the sticker prices are so much bigger for a lot of the smaller private colleges, the financial aid is so much bigger. So the end result for Scott is he's going into his junior year, and he already has enough, and he also works. He's working full-time in the summer. But we can already see through his junior year, zero debt.
Wow.
So he's not going to have any debt. And I believe that will continue through his senior year, but we're kind of going semester to semester, year to year, and he has enough in his account. We do this in thirds, because we believe, their dad and I believe that kids need to have skin in the game. So we do it in thirds. The kids are responsible for a third, and each of us are responsible for a third. So he's in great shape. Olivia ended up at the same school, but it was really one of her fallbacks. She's my wanderer. Both my girls are wanderers. She really wanted to go East Coast, in Boston area and some of those. So she applied, I think, to, ended up with 8 schools, but very well thought out. She was really on top of things. And again, some of the measures that you don't always think about is percent of the need, percent of financial aid that's met. Like, you might have financial need, but a school might not necessarily meet it. So she, with some help from me, understood some of those measures to look at. And she got accepted to a couple places, but that next step of looking deeper, found out that one of the places that she was accepted to did not have a good record in terms of financial aid after the first year. So it was like the first year they bring them in, and then it drops a lot the second, third, and fourth year. So anyway, she ended up in the same school, but it's a great fit for her, but for different reasons. And she's already lined up, providing the pandemic doesn't goof things up. She's already lined up a semester. The school does a great job with study abroad and other internships and other opportunities. And so she's lined up a semester back in Washington, D.C. at American University for the spring. So she's not actually going to be on that campus a lot, I think, but she really enjoys it, as a great friend group. So, and her financial aid package turned to be about the same. And it looks like right now she will get through her sophomore year without taking on any debt. And both of them are paying, and now financial aid from a family perspective, definitely, if you have more than one kid in college, that helps the financial aid picture too. But Scott is paying, they're both paying less than what the sticker price would have been for an in-state school. Wow. I mean, significantly less, like a third less of what an in-state school would have cost. So your
advice is, don't dismiss the local college.
Yes, one piece is do not miss the private colleges, not just the in-state private colleges, but even around, because the one that they attend is very intentional about recruiting out of state and even internationally. So they have about 50% Minnesotans and 50% from everywhere else, including, if it's not all 50 states, it's almost all 50 states, and a lot, like 24 international countries. So so if your child wants to go to a private school, there might be a great one 3 states over that maybe doesn't have a kid from Minnesota or a kid from Nebraska or a kid. So you never know until you start looking around, but absolutely don't discount the ability of the smaller liberal arts colleges to provide some terrific financial aid packages.
That's a very good advice because I don't think we think about that.
I think a lot of parents don't. It's true.
Yeah. And I mean, going through that process, it is a big part of our kids' growth, right? Like, when they transition from high school into this college and university life, right? And there's lots going on, like emotionally, financially, and all the, records for them to get to the school, right? Timing, right? Not
Yes.
deadlines.
Yes, absolutely.
Get it in on time, right? You don't want to miss it. If you miss it by 2 days, that funding will not be available to you, right?
Yep.
So lots going on. So what you're going to do, guiding parents through that process, and being able to guide the student through that process, their kids through that process, is important, right?
Right, because it's such a complicated process, so many different steps and so many very key deadlines at the same time. But most kids too, I mean, they've got their academics, they've got their extracurricular, they've got their social, and for the most part they have their attitudes.
And they're planning their prom.
And they're planning their prom, exactly. So it can be such a stressful time. One of the things that I really promote are having key discussions with your kids. And in my mindset, I've broken them up into different areas. And certainly one big category is the financial piece. Really being pretty transparent with your kid, hopefully starting the conversation before 11th or 12th grade, but helping them understand, you start with budgeting maybe, and you start with to the detail level that you're comfortable with as a family. But this is what our family finances look like, and this is what, and it depends if you have an only child or if you have 3 kids, 4 kids, this is what we are prepared to do or prepared to help with for your college. So what we need, you need to understand that going into the college search process. I think if you don't do that as a parent, and your kids all of a sudden they want to go to XYZ schools and they're all like super expensive without a lot of financial aid, I think you're setting your kid up for issues on many levels. Either disappointment at the end where you say no, and that's tricky too, because a kid's going to be 18. They can sign on the dotted line at that point. They could just say, well, I'm going, see ya. So either you have to be the bad guy and say, no, I'm sorry, I know you were accepted and you're excited about it, but we can't pay for it. Or they've applied to all these places without understanding that even if they get in, they're not going to be able to pay for it. So they don't have a backup that they can pay for.
Yeah.
So it's just important to have the discussions. And something else that I recommend, and I don't claim by any measure that I did all this perfectly with the first 2, and I'm not going to do it perfectly with the third. She's going into her senior year now, so I'm right back in the thick of it. But it's setting up a time, and again, it depends on the age, the grade level of the kid, but setting up a time once, senior year is like once a week or every 2 weeks. Junior year is probably like just once a month. But setting up a time like Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon, like, okay, we're going to talk an hour or 2 about college stuff. Mm-hmm. And one of the things in my consulting program that I'm going to do is help roughly about monthly, is here are some great conversations to have with your kid right now. Here's some talking points. You have to tailor it for your kid, for your family, for your child, but here's some talking points. And here in October, it's all about financial aid because the FAFSA, the big federal form comes out, is released October 1st. So here are the documents you need, here are the discussions you should be having, and so forth. So, but I don't think anybody, parent or kid, wants to get to the end of November and all of a sudden you're doing a crash course on the college admissions process in a weekend. I mean, talk about a formula for disastrous stress in the household, bad decisions. And these are decisions, to me, it's like, it used to be 10, 20 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly the time that I went to college, it used to be that going to college was like, you could send your kid off to make decisions and it's like sending them off to buy a car. It's expensive. It could be an expensive mistake if they buy a lemon, but it's recoverable. Now it feels like if you just leave it all to them, it's like you're sending them off to buy a house. It's like, here, go figure out how to buy a house, right neighborhood, figure, does the plumbing work? You figure all that yourself. The difference between getting out of school with no debt or low debt, a job, and a good relationship with each other, the difference between that scenario and then coming out with the massive amounts of debt. I mean, wow. Yes. You're a math teacher. You could just put up a math table about what it would be like to be on the hook for, say, $400 or $500 a month for 20 years to pay off your student loans, or you're putting that amount into a 401k of a job that you got because you went to a school that gave you great opportunities to get that job. And now you're putting it in a 401k, and by the way, the company is matching it, and the difference is extraordinary. So I'm excited to try to help parents figure that out with their kids.
Yeah, very, very cool project. I was going to say that one example earlier was that when you guys went on the road trip, you actually drove by the university and college and kind of planted the seed, right? I mean, these conversation doesn't have to be, because sometimes you don't know what your child want to do. Like, you don't have to push them. Like, you must go to college. Those eras are over, right?
Totally. Yes.
You don't have to choose for them. But if you could just plant the seed, and there's this opportunity that you could go to college, you could go to university or wherever, right? And then eventually, like you said, have these conversation here and there, starting a little earlier, that they could kind of see, do I want to do that or no? It's up to them. But yeah, so cool.
Totally. And I think that middle school age is such a great time to start thinking and planning. It's not a sitting down and mapping out entire high school and the checkbox. Okay, you have to do this, you have to do that. The check. Make sure you get into the honor society. Make sure you do. All that. It's not about that at all. It's about, like you said, we stopped in. We didn't do any formal tours, but just driving through, or we'd park somewhere and walk through. Maybe go into the school store and I kind of knew what the kids were interested in, but I've never been this. I want them to decide for themselves what they want to do. And ironically, for my son, I really thought at the time he was going to be more of a science engineering, an engineer type of guy. So one of our last stops was at Virginia Tech, and which he really liked. He didn't like a lot of the other trips, or a lot of the side trips we took, but he was interested in that. But now he's going to end up being a chemistry teacher, which is fantastic. But just like you said, understanding that college is an option. We absolutely talked about other options. I mean, I'm from the military. I did go to the Naval Academy, but enlisting in the military, or they're going right into the workforce. When we did the factory tour, we talked about the different kinds of jobs, and the engineering type of jobs are going to require a college degree, but if you're on the floor working, probably not. And so we started those discussions, and the presumption was, based on their academic ability, that they would go to college, but absolutely was not you must go to college. But I think it was great to start the conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, I just remember when you said you must go to college, my dad's like, you must always become doctor. No. He kept telling me I never did, but but I mean, those days are over, right? You do not want to put that kind of pressure on your kids. That's not what this is about.
Well, and that reminds me of something too with Amy. Amy was my overachiever, had to get all the grades. that year, at the end of her homeschool year, they had to take the standardized test. That was part for homeschool, the state law, but also to go back into school, they were required to take the standardized test. And I kind of prepared her because I figured that she'd either plateau or might even dip a little bit because she wasn't getting the same checks in the block. And she did. She went from being up in the 99th percentile down to about 94th percentile.
Mm-hmm.
And she has said recently that, that kind of crushed her at the time, but it didn't take her long into middle school to realize that she had a friend. She was in these high classes and she had friends that were so stressed out about every grade and getting every check in the box. And also parents who, for Science Olympiad would come to Science Olympiad and be all over the kids with studying and doing things. So I think that helped her and will continue to help her through into college to realize that, do your best, try to get good grades. But if you don't, if you did your best and you get a 95, you do your best and you get an 85, it's okay.
Yeah.
And so that,
yeah,
I think that was a real value.
Yeah, take the pressure off.
Yes.
Let them lead you to what they want to be, right? That's the
I mean, I challenge them. I think we absolutely, as parents, we want
Good
to challenge them to be their best, to find their niche or niches and pursue that. But absolutely, they've gone in directions I didn't necessarily expect. But it's been fantastic to watch them grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So the last question is, what advice do you have for parents who are, right now after the COVID and everything, we all are feeling, some of us, should I homeschool, should I or not? I know you didn't really homeschool them. You just took them out for 1 year, which is kind of, homeschooling.
Different, but yeah.
Yeah. So what do you say to them? What's your advice for them?
A couple parts. First of all, I think if a parent can look at their financial situation and whether you have a partner, spouse, and combine that and see if you can do the 1 year, and depending on the age of your kids and so forth, absolutely do it. As I've said, best mom decision I've ever done. It was phenomenal year and experiences. We don't talk about it a lot, but when we do, it's always with smiles and laughs, and we remember the stories and so forth. So absolutely do it. I think going into the fall semester of 2020, it would definitely look different because we just don't have the freedom to travel right now. It's getting there, but still a lot of the places that we went to wouldn't be open at this point. But there's so much more available online. If for homeschooling in general, it's a different scenario. I knew that was not something that I really wanted to do full time, especially for a long time, especially for high school. So I think just for parents, doing the research online and seeing and looking, really self-reflecting, do I have this? Because it's not just sitting. I think a lot of people struggled in this spring with online learning, because it's not just sitting your kid in front of a computer and having them go through classes. That to me, it doesn't have a lot of value personally. Some parents, some families, no judgment by all means. But for me, it was about the family unit. It was about traveling. It was about connection, the community, that type of thing. And not worrying about getting every check in the block. So we did a lot of outside the box types of things. So if you're comfortable with that flexibility and not having the structure, then absolutely try to do it. And the good thing, I think one of the great things about this 1 year model is it doesn't really have to be a 1 year. I mean, you could probably pull something together maybe for a semester. Maybe if you're in a two parent household, both are working, maybe one could take a 4-month leave, or even one could take a 2-month leave, back-to-back 2-month leaves, and do it that way and just do a semester. That would certainly, I think, also be valuable. But I would say, even looking ahead to next summer, if parents have their gears turning about doing something like this, it's maybe just start with a 2.5 to 3 week trip, but plan it as if it were not just a vacation somewhere, but plan it like it was a homeschool type of trip. And so take a look at maybe what academics you might be able to do and make it fun, absolutely, but and national parks and maybe arts and music. I mean, the different things you could do, as well as getting the kids involved in planning. And that would maybe be a good test case.
Yes, yes,
So
absolutely. I'm not sure how much of it is going to be open, but still there's lots outdoor you can go
yeah,
do,
well,
right?
hopefully by next summer we'll be returning more to
Normal.
we'll have a vaccine. There'll be better treatments, and
Yeah.
I'm hopeful.
Yes, of course we have to stay. But I was going to say that, you know, if the parents do decide to do that, they can always take their kids back again to the school. Like, it just it's change is not to be feared, right? Like look at 2020, right?
Yes,
It's a full of changes, right? But there's opportunities within that, and there's a positive. Take the positive out of it, right? And then
absolutely. The caution to that would be, I think, and again, I'm geared towards that middle school group. For what we did, I think fifth grade, maybe fourth grade, depending, like if you had a fourth grader and a seventh grader or something, that might work. But really younger than that, this model I don't think is particularly good, because you could do a lot with your younger elementary school on the road and such. But in terms of remembering the lessons, the life skills and so forth, I think it's that fifth to eighth grade is the ideal time frame.
yeah.
And at that age too, I think they're old enough and mature enough that you want to be careful, not do anything willy-nilly, and make sure, even if they don't have a choice, that you're giving them a voice, and that you're talking to them about it. You're talking through your decision-making process. So let's say in 2021, 2022, you want to do this and you've planned for it, but you start next fall of 2021, and you're starting through this fall, and it's like, oh, this is not working out for whatever reason, then it's not like a knee-jerk reaction, okay, oh, back to school. But maybe like, okay, in October going, okay, well, I think we're just going to do this semester, and let's move this back. And but talk to the kids and help them understand the why, the reasons and so forth, to the level that you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think as parents, it's going to be uncomfortable. At times it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be hard, because you have to put a lot of work in to figure things out, and also help your kids figure things out. And there are times that, boy, you maybe like more structure, but it's better for the kids to, I remember one morning, their dad's birthday, they were writing a poem, and they ended up writing a poem for him all morning. And there's this little piece of me that's saying, like, oh, okay, we're not getting this and this done, but I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. And that poem was hilarious. And to listen to them. And so to be willing to think outside the box as parents too, and not just to face the fear.
Yes, of course. Yes, good advice. Thank you so much for all your advice. I think you have a great program for helping parents transitioning from high school to college or university. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Great opportunity.
Thank you.